So, let's get into this. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview as we think through, and I'm going to mark each of these different stages with a little bit of music, so we'll try to sing through the centuries together as well. So when we think of Judaism, many of us grew up with the idea of Judaism as a religion. And then Mordecai Kaplan offered us, at the turn of the 20th century, a more sociological idea, right? That Judaism is not a religion, but it's the evolving religious civilization of the Jewish people. And you can hear the resonance and the impact of American democracy, of, by, and for the people. Before that, the idea was, well, we existed for something called Judaism out there. But the difference with being a people as opposed to just a religion, right? I'd like to say in the Jewish view, if Judaism fell in the forest and there was nobody to hear us fall, would there be a Judaism? To bring in the old Buddhist conundrum, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? We would actually say no. Without the Jewish people, Judaism does not exist. Because our culture, our language, our music, every place we are is part of the fabric of what Judaism is. Not only ideas of ritual. And that's why I think music has such a core place. And we don't just sing one song. Wherever we have been, we have incorporated the culture of that place into our music. Fortunately, I was I thought to ask my grandfather, Aaron, before he died, why we sang such a unique Chad Gadya in Pesach that I never heard anywhere else. I just actually finished recording this on an upcoming CD. That's how I grew up, with Chad Gadya. So finally, when I asked him one night, he said, "Oh, your Uncle Dave and I were walking by a Russian pub when we were, were younger in Russia, and we heard the Cossacks singing that. And we came back to your great Zeta, and we said, we got this tune, we think it'll work to Chad Gadya." And he said, "Okay, go ahead, work on it." Right? Now, who was my great-grandfather, Ben Sion? He was the rabbi, shochet, and mohel of this village. He did not tear his garment and go, "You are no sons of mine, no Russian melody will ever be in my house." The sort of classic images we have. He said, "Oh, that works. We are of the culture in which we are. You work on it. If it sounds good, we'll use it. If it stinks when we sing it, we're not going to use it." So it has to make sense in both those particular worlds. So these different periods of time we think classically are the biblical period up to the destruction of the Second Temple. The rabbinic period, which you see is generally thought of from 70 to 1000 of the Common Era. The medieval or Middle Ages from 1000 to 1700, but that's really fluid. Because in Western Europe, come Napoleon, etc., our becoming citizens and our movement into the culture gives birth to a whole other music that 200 years later, they're not even tuned into in parts of Russia and Eastern Europe. So that place, one person's middle age can be another person's, old age or younger age, depending on where you are in history. And then we get into the modern period, which often in Jewish timeline, not in general timeline, is demarked by the founding of the Commonwealth of Israel, the state of Israel, the modern state of Israel, because a whole flourishing and a hybrid potpourri of all different Jewish cultures comes into one place. And to this day, now in fact with Arab and Jewish Israeli music mixing, a whole other sound starts to develop. And then we arrogantly call ourselves contemporary, but we'll be passé soon enough, and they'll call us the postmoderns or the used to be contemporary or whatever they'll give a sign to ourselves for. So I just wanted you to have a sense of that as we go into understanding Jewish music. Now I wanted to bring you a previous definition of what Jewish music is. The most workable definition seems one proposed by German musicologist Kurt Sachs at the first International Congress of Jewish Music in 1957. So we get together, what do we do as Jews? First of all, we have to define what we're talking about, right? So that's the first order of business at the very first Congress, and they come up with this definition. Jewish music is that music which is made by Jews, for Jews, as Jews. That's the definition in 1957. Now let me ask you, would you hold that to be the definition definition today, or how might you tweak that if someone was to say you define Jewish music? Yeah, please.
The way that reads, I'm thinking of like Mati Siahu, like more modern, mainstream artists who happen to be Jewish, but they're making music for a wider audience. The Beastie Boys as well. And just really good Jewish people making really good music, sometimes with Jewish themes, but they're not making it as Jews. It's the last piece. They're not making it for, no, it's the middle piece. They're not making it for Jews, they're making it from.
Or might one say not exclusively for, right? Because if we use the two suggestions, we've got a broad age range here, so to just give a sampling of what you suggested, in the first case. Jewish music, that is music which is made by the Jews for the Jews, as the Jews, we might say is Mati Siahu, right? Or we might say is Adam and the Beastie Boys, Jewish music, made by Jews, not exclusively though, for Jews. So that would be a way of expressing that particular piece. And I could feel, as a Beastie Boy or as Mati Siahu, authentically Jewish. In fact, one could say the shift between Beastie Boys, who are kind of the seniors of the early rap scene, and Mati Siahu, is they are Jewishly identified, but Mati Siahu is Jewishly practicing. In other words, the idea that I'm out there as an observant Jew, doing my music not just for Jews, is already a shift from the entrance of Jews into the mainstream, where we were doing music made by Jews, not just for Jews, or in fact not for Jews, and maybe kind of as Jews, but not publicly. Right? So that's already been a shift. It's a great thing that you, I don't have a Chrysler Cordova, but I promise you I'll give you another gift this evening for planting that one. So I think that's a really good way of tweaking that. That it no longer is Jewish music just exclusively for Jews. And in fact, if you look at parts of Europe and here in North America as well, non-Jews come to events. I was in Sweden with a cantor, and we did an evening of Jewish music at a local university. And I think there were 10 Jews there. Everybody else was coming because Jewish music is now part of the larger cultural scene that you want to be, part of the hip scene you want to be into. And see as world music. We've never had a situation where world music is a defined category. Yeah.
A possible problem with that definition, maybe not, I don't know. A lot of, especially in the Reform movement, they've had organs in their places of worship, and the organs have been played by non-Jewish organists who have studied Jewish music and loved Jewish music and have composed Jewish music. What do we do about music made by Jews? Liturgical music that's...
Well, so let's, at the second, I don't know what number of Congress this is, but at the Tuesday, October 12th Congress of the Music of the Jewish People, Jewish music is that music which is made by Jews or non-Jews, for Jews or non-Jews, as Jews, allies, and fellow travelers, right? Yes. So we might expand that definition to be more of a working definition of reality, what you're dealing with. One of the folks who was an office manager who worked with me in Philadelphia for many years sang in a synagogue choir. He was a proud Catholic. He knew more about Jewish music than anybody else on staff, except for a couple of the other of us, but he knew nuances of other things. And you're right, that was just part, shul on Saturday, church on Sunday, mosque on Friday, I got all my gigs lined up, and then there's the barbershop quartet on top of it. So there's a lot of different definitions, but I like that. Let's leave it. Let's not try to define it, but let's beautifully, I couldn't have asked for a better build-up to move from what you had suggested to adding that other piece where we realize it's not just us anymore. So when we look at the biblical period, there are many references. There's a word called Yuval, literally, to rejoice. That was, and Yuval is called the ancestor of all who play the kinnor and the ugav. That's from Bereshit, Genesis chapter 4. Okay. We don't have a photo of Yuval. I don't have any of his CDs to offer you today. But in the very beginning of creation, in the same chapters, we've got Cain and Abel and the whole gang there. We get the name of the ancestor of all musicians.